What's up, guys? Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com here with another episode of the RMR Podcast. Today, joined by special guest from the home state, Friesen of Heylo Cannabis. How you doing, Lo?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Yes. Glad to have you on here. We've been running around in the same state and same market for quite some time, and it's funny now, like where how cannabis is so rapidly expanding to be. It's such a blessing to be from the state where it's like, we were right behind Colorado. We've had this recreational thing going on a little bit longer than a lot of these places.
Oh yeah, I argue that we have like some of the top-notch stuff here and most innovative products out here. So we're lucky to be surrounded by it.
Absolutely. And even on that tip too, it's like this market, kind of the regulation, not having the outside money and being first, MSOs, it's not attractive market for MSOs to come and compete in. So it's like really kind of created this cool market where it's just there's a lot of craft and it's a lot of competition within craft, which I feel like really breeds to like quality, really puts an emphasis on quality to the consumer.
Yeah, it's really hard to be an operator here. Like you said, nobody really wants to come here, especially after experiencing other states, but it's really good for the consumer. It makes sure that they get access to the best stuff and yeah, it really drives consumer feedback, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so before we get too deep to this conversation, I start off every episode with our guest kind of origin story around the plant being cannabis. So I'm kind of curious, personally, whatever you feel like sharing and professionally, what's your starting point with cannabis?
Well, I always have preferred cannabis over alcohol, so I actually used it recreationally for some time before really understanding the medical side of things too, and that it really encompasses both medical and recreation. And so my story with cannabis and also getting into the cannabis industry starts with my work at a hospital. I was working at a hospital in Chicago and had access to tons of research papers there. And I heard patients talking to me about how they were using cannabis, even though it was illegal back then, how they were using it to treat some of their symptoms. And so I started looking into it on the medical side and really saw a lot of research, not from the US, but outside of the US. And I was like, wow, this really has some legitimacy to it. And I started learning about why I was using it not only for fun times, but also like when I was having trouble with anxiety or like depression during the dark days of winter. And so it really inspired me to learn more and more. And at the same time, I was actually going to go into medical school, but that path ended for me. And so I was looking for other opportunities. And my family actually was the one who encouraged me to explore cannabis as a career because I'm from the Midwest. Hey, I see somebody from Pittsburgh here. And I'm from the Midwest, and the opioid crisis out there is still really bad. And back then, it was really impacting my community. And so much of my family who had been in medicine was talking about the impact that cannabis could have on addiction, how it could support with withdrawal treatment and help with mitigating addiction. And so they really inspired me to look into it as a career. And that's when I found extraction. And so, long story, semi shorter, I ended up in Seattle, Washington from Chicago and found my way to Eden Labs, who manufactures CO2 extraction equipment, also local to Seattle. Like we have so many amazing cannabis industry folks here. And so that was my first entrance into the manufacturing side. And I just like totally fell in love with it and realized that my background, which is in chemistry, also with the medical experience I had had, and then as a recreational user, it was kind of this trifecta of really wanting to do more for consumers here because at the time, there were a lot of vape cartridges available, but I didn't think that they were that good. And I kept asking myself, why when I consume a vape cartridge that says Blue Dream, for example, and I smoke the Blue Dream flower, it gives me a different experience. And that was really confusing to me. And so the chemist in me was like trying to figure it out. What's the difference? What's the difference? And I really finally understood that it was because everybody was looking for THC only and stripping so much out of the plant that really gives us these incredible experiences and the benefits. So that's how I got into cannabis and how I found myself starting Heylo in 2017.
And like we were saying right before that, that's early for this recreational game for a lot of the people, as quite a the people I bet out there listening, especially from the Midwest that are finally getting in the game where you're from.
Yeah.
And that product maturation, the THC thing is such a wild thing, right? Like in the industry, there's this echo chamber of everyone being like, THC percentage doesn't matter. Consumer doesn't give a shit. They're chasing THC. I
Yep.
think, from my perspective, I think like Washington is a lot for the higher end consumer, at least. Like in Washington, I think THC doesn't play the role as far as like California. The clients and work I do in Cali, it's like around 30% or over on flower is like you have to be there. I feel
Right.
like in Washington, there's a lot of high end stuff out here that's like sub 20 and sells out just fine. But I know when we move into the vape cartridge game, I think the THC percentage has always kind of held a more esteem with the customer, for right or for wrong. And do you feel like that's something that's still there today, or do you feel like education's kind of changed it since those earlier days in 2017?
Well, speaking of the early days, I want to pivot real quick and just mention that you and Joey came through the lab like a long time ago, I think, like when we were just getting started and had such great, like, it really inspired me and validated what we were doing even back then, because it's been an upward battle since then, like you said, people chasing THC. So I would say that while we've done a lot of work to kind of carve out and bring people into the community that's not looking for just THC, or who has been kind of like failed by the traditional marketing that's been done around THC, that there's still a ton of work to do, especially in the vape cartridge world, because I think people look more to that, like, how much THC can I get for my dollar? And it's a commodity, and so we really have to do a ton of education still, not only on current users, but also new consumers who are coming into the market saying, like, I don't know what sativa is, I don't know what indica is, I've heard of THC, but like I want to experience what my friend experienced the other day when they like cleaned their whole house, or had the best time at a concert, or like ate the best food they've ever eaten because of cannabis. So there's still a ton of work to be done, but I would say that education, you said it, is the only way to expanding that and getting beyond that, because we know that it's not just THC. THC, like chasing THC, is like only drinking Everclear or taking prescription meds, as opposed to like looking for the holistic, what nature can provide us.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And you said it a little bit earlier. It's like, when something with higher THC versus something that's lower but more full spectrum, I don't know if the proper scientific term is get you higher, but is like, or fuller effect. I don't know. I've heard it described so many different ways, but for just trying to dumb it down for the sake of consumer, I'll say hits you harder. You definitely feel it more, as a vape card, you get like a 95% distillate versus like a full spectrum, a live resin that's like 77%. Man, that 77% is going to smack you a lot. Again, I don't want to say harder is necessarily the technical term, but just a better. It's gonna get you more right than the one with the THC, which is ironic. And people still, like, sometimes you tell that to the consumer and they still just reach the 90.
Well, because it's like counterintuitive, right? Because THC is what you associate with that high, and if you get more, like, you're going to get more high. Well, the science of it really is that your body can only process so much THC. Like, once you get past a certain point, your receptors just can't process it. So there is like a limit to it, right? So above that, you're kind of paying for, just the number. But you mentioned it, like that full, more like balanced experience comes from not only THC, but also the other cannabinoids and terpenes that are in the product that interact with your system, that provide you with that like really long lasting, full, complex experience. So we always say, if you get like a distillate, for example, that's 90 some percent THC, we call that a narrow high, because it's only giving you what THC offers. When you smoke flower, there's like hundreds of compounds that are interacting with your body to give you, whether it's like the super awesome stupid high that you're looking for, or something that's going to inspire you to write music, and so we can't just do THC. We need the other stuff in order to give us what, the plant doesn't just produce THC. So how can we recreate that on the extract side?
Yeah, I love it. And, big shout out to you and the people that are really diving in there on the science and making the products that we can enjoy. Like I said, I don't quite understand this. I got the one, maybe the 201 level understanding of it. But I know that due to people like yourself putting in the work, man, there's a lot of good products out there for us to enjoy. And so, one of the things about Heylo, I know you guys are rooted in, like, a big part of it is like health and wellness. And while that is like an oversaturated category when you talk about cannabis or CBD, I feel like your guys' approach isn't like, it's very like authentic. You know what I mean? It's not like you bought these stock images of people like exercising and just slap CBD and stuff around. No disrespect to anyone out there doing that, if that's what you're doing. But it's a different approach. Like, I feel like, where it just feels authentic and it doesn't seem as much as like, it's very like cannabis forward with health and wellness supporting that, as opposed to a lot of other people I feel like do the reverse of put more so health and wellness at the forefront and then cannabis at secondary. So I'm kind of curious, like, how you see, and you kind of touched on a little bit in the origin question, but how you see the kind of the inflection point between health and wellness and cannabis.
Well, our mission is to help anyone get more out of life, and you can do that in so many different ways. And so our goal is to highlight how you can incorporate cannabis into your lifestyle and life to get more out of each day. And so that can mean, incorporating it into your wellness practice, like meditation or yoga or exercise, or into your social life to be more social, to be happier, to be more in the moment. And so I appreciate you saying it's genuine, because, everything we do revolves around our mission. And so it kind of has to involve like that holistic aspect of life in order to live the mission. And so we focus on the chemistry side of it and the education side, so that the customer can take all the information that we offer and say, and like kind of empower themselves. And so it's not binary. It's not like black and white. It's not this or that. It's about opening up your perspective. And that's what I think cannabis has done for myself and so many others, and like our world. This is like the first new industry since tech. And we have an opportunity to disrupt so many different avenues of our lives, from like, writing in equity from the beginning, like social equity, and, creating opportunities for women and like underprivileged communities, and really lifting up our communities. And so I think cannabis inherently is this like very balanced, community driven plant, and it travels like throughout everything. And we, as the industry members, are responsible for continuing that thread, right? And so whenever we put out products, or whenever like we discover something new, we want to get that out there to the consumer. And so that's why we are so education forward and so transparent, because we are learning every single day. And we're also learning like how to incorporate it into our lives even more. So when we, shoot a workout video for our new workout plan cannabis product, it's because we're like, you guys have to try this. Like, you'll never want to stop working out, or, if you are looking for, in the pandemic, we kind of lost some social skills, right? And so we talk about CBG, which is one of the cannabinoids that's not as commonly found in cannabis, but it is a really important cannabinoid. And it lifts your spirits. It gets you chatty. It makes you want to socialize. And so it's something that, you can incorporate and benefit your life by using and knowing how to use it. So we're just like really excited about all these different things, and genuinely want to share that with people and with our community.
That's awesome. And another thing that I've noticed about you guys, kind of to build off that, is you mentioned social equity. It's been a big conversation in cannabis. I've had a lot of guests where that's been the center around the conversation. As legalizations moved, again, Washington were one of the first ones. We were just lucky to get legal cannabis. We definitely, we didn't get delivery, we didn't get home grow. Social equity wasn't a conversation until Black Lives Matter movement came and made that a mainstream commercialized talking point for a lot of people. Shout out the fake progressiveness that we live in. But you guys have really been a proponent of obviously being a female-led, woman-led company, which is not the majority in this industry. But you have always been, I feel like, from a brand, and you personally have always, I won't even say spoken out, but just incorporated different communities, marginalized communities, the non-majority in what you guys have done from a content perspective, and what you've done from the work that you've put out there, the partnerships and the collaborations you guys have done. Why has that always been important to you? And again, I will give you your flowers. That was important before it was a mainstream talking point in this space. So just curious, kind of the inspiration and the why for you in that regard.
Well, our mission is to help anyone get more out of life. And that, on the flip side is also everyone. And I think I wish I had this like profound statement about it, but it's just really what we believe, I think even though we want to always feel like we can easily include everyone, like you do have to go out of your way a lot of times, because if anybody knows Seattle, like we don't really have a diverse community here. And I came here from Chicago, and which is like super diverse. And so I guess it's about the community that I want to cultivate and that our team wants to cultivate. And that reflects in the collaborations that we do. And the more diverse perspectives we can have, the better we can be as a company, as a community, as an industry. So I wouldn't say we had to like go out of our way, because we were already cultivating that type of community. And so it will always be an important part of Heylo and, anything that we do, because I want our industry to be the best that it can. And like I said, a more diverse industry is a better industry.
I love that. And I agree. And I think it's important. And again, like, big salute to you guys, yourself, personally as well for the work you guys have been doing in that. Cause it's important. And like you said, being a local out here, we are not that diverse of an area. Some people think of us, again, we have this label as like super hyper progressive and whatever. While we may be in certain veins, you go walk around, it does not look, there's a lot of other parts of the country that are much more diverse than what we are. And I think that's important, like what you said, of just that effort, whether it's super intentional or conscious or whatever the reasoning is. I think that the effort needs to be made to bring inclusivity, to bring diversity, to make sure that things look how it should look, right? That things are represented. And that's like, I think the biggest part of social equity for me in this space is like trying to make it look like it should. We, for whatever reason, it's not, you look at ownership, the makeup of the C-suite level, it's not what it should be when you compare it to the cannabis use demographic. And so it's definitely important for individuals and companies to push community and the right community.
And to normalize like what somebody who uses cannabis looks like, which is not one type of person, right. It's all types of people, and breaking down the stigma of like what the cannabis user looks like. And so that's a really important aspect of it too, because as a brand, we represent so much, and I want people to see themselves in Heylo. I want people to see themselves using cannabis in a way that helps them get more out of life. And so that includes everybody, and it's okay, to find that groove with yourself, even though so many communities have been torn down by cannabis, and so many families have been broken because of the history with cannabis and our government. And so we have to do what we can to destigmatize, to educate, to give back, to work with causes that support freedom and diversity and equity and inclusion. And that you have to go out of your way to do that.
And, with that, you said, how many or the cannabis consumer it's wide, right? Like what they look like, where they are, what their job title is. I mean, it transcends everything, right?
Yeah.
How is it from like a marketing perspective or a brand perspective of like trying to identify who the ideal consumer type is when everyone's using cannabis? And it is, like you said, your mission is wanting to meet people, for cannabis, for everyone, to be broad, but that's difficult when it comes to positioning and marketing perspective. So I'm just kind of curious some of your approaches on like, how do you approach marketing towards such a wide group of people?
Well, traditionally, everybody looks at demographic or like who's your ideal customer as, race or gender or age. And we kind of don't really subscribe to that. And so while it may seem like we're marketing to a like overly large net of people, the reality is that we're actually marketing to a very specific type of person, a person that is conscious about what they do every day. They're conscious about what they're putting in their body. They're conscious and intentional with their cannabis use. And not everybody is that way. In fact, a lot of people aren't, and that's totally fine. Like we all, every product has its place, right, in our lives. And so again, while it may seem like we're marketing to a very wide net of people, we're actually marketing to a very specific group, and it comes down to our mission. And that market is growing. We can see it across the board, especially after the past few years, people reflecting on their life and like their life choices, and that at a moment's notice, things can completely change. And so taking a look at your life and saying, what can I do to be the best version of myself? And if we can help you find a cannabis product that does that, then we're doing our job.
I hope other people running companies take notes of that, where she said, while it is appropriate to everyone, it is a focused consumer type that you're looking at. And that doesn't mean it's exclusive. I don't know why it seems to be more on the retail side, but I constantly talk to marketers and owners in this industry who are unable to answer that question, right? They're like, well, it's everyone. It's everyone. And I'm like, that's an expensive and impossible task to be everything.
That is
for
impossible. Everyone. And that's like a big, that's a really interesting piece of our industry. That's been really interesting to watch, is the fact that there aren't really too many brands that are focusing on the entire company as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. Like we've focused at the same time about on the product, making sure it's the best product that we can produce, and also that it is going to be received in the market in a way that we want it to be received, so that people understand when this product is right for them, who it's right for, and how they can use it to optimize what they purchased, as opposed to what most other people are doing, which is saying, here's cheap THC. This is what all consumers want. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to identify with. And so I think if you take the approach of lowest or, bang for your buck, then I guess you're marketing to everybody. But we know that we are not, and I know that we can't, because I'm not, we're not a funded company. We're bootstrapped, and we've kind of had to like figure it out, which, anyone out there, I could do a lot with $1 million, but we've had to really, be really focused, and we didn't have a whole lot of leeway, but we've also taken it as a strength because we've been able to pivot when we needed to, or like do things the way we want to, which is kind of against the grain, and not have to answer to like a team of investors that are like forcing our hand into other ways. And so a lot of people have had to go that route. And while it may be easier in some respects, I think it might be harder as well. So, it's just a different route, I guess.
Absolutely. I personally identify with that, and I define strength as well. I would describe it the same way, the ability to pivot. The best part about being lean, there's plenty of cons, but one of the few pros is like you can pivot a lot quicker
Yep.
when you're when you're lean,
Yeah, I
man.
know you know the hustle.
Oh man. So, obviously starting in 2017, you've seen trends across cannabis and the maturation. Obviously, it's been a little bit slower in this, being that we're one of the first markets. Other markets are seeing it a little bit quicker pace, but they're seeing the same exact thing in terms of the maturation, which I feel like I saw kind of in the black or gray market, whatever you want to call it, before cannabis was legalized. The maturation of the consumer there seemed to match recreation. But when it comes to concentrates, or specifically vape cartridges, what are some of those trends that you see have kind of peaked as we've matured through this? And then I got to actually, I'll just ask that, and then I got a follow-up question I'm gonna write on that. I'm thinking 2 questions at a time right now.
Trends in the cartridge world. Well, post vape crisis, I would say trends had shifted more towards consumers questioning the product. So what's in it? It really caused consumers to have to take the lead on putting their dollar where they wanted it to go and finding products that they could trust, where most consumers didn't know that there were shady products out there to get to find in the beginning. Like, not all products are created equally. Let's just say that. And so it really forced companies to establish better practices. And so we are seeing more and more products that are, I would say, higher quality. On top of that, people are willing to, I would say, pay more for higher quality, even down to the hardware. So we're seeing better quality vape cartridges come out on the market because the investment is worth it. And then lastly, I want to poke a little bit at live resin, which you mentioned earlier, which a lot of people are using that term, I think, in a way that's just like a connotation. Whereas, like, when it started, live resin meant extracted from fresh frozen plant material. And so it actually has a completely different chemical profile than the dried cured flower that you purchase on the shelf. So it's something different. It's usually more terpene rich, but it's kind of transitioned to encompass other meanings. And we've been doing a lot of polls recently with consumers and retailers, because we're trying to understand what live resin means to the industry. And so we're seeing a lot of cartridges being labeled live resin, which I believe their meaning is that it's from strain specific, or it has cannabis derived terpenes, but it has nothing to do with using fresh frozen plant material. So that's been a really interesting trend that I'm keeping a pulse on, because Heylo produces full spectrum CO2 extracted cannabis oil, 100% cannabis, never used any additives or anything like that. But I would never categorize us as a live resin. But people are. So it's been interesting to see that development.
Yeah, and something we've noticed, Joey and I have talked about, we see a lot of products marketed as live resin, but it's distillate mixed with live resin terpenes or something, or they add a little bit of it in there.
There's a whole lot of that too, which is like painful to me to see, because consumers have no idea.
Right. And that's it's interesting you brought up like the vape crisis, or whatever, whatever the buzzword we want to attach to that little blip in time. But it definitely, I saw it as well. We ran an article on a few things. We might have potentially almost gotten sued for a few things that we said, but whatever, broke those tackles. Still undefeated in court, knock on wood. But it definitely, we saw that as well. Like, a lot of the content we put out there, consumers like asked that for the first time, which is, it's mind-boggling, but also like coming from the black market of consuming. When I first tried oil, now what I know now, what I tried was not safe, was not clean, but I didn't question it at all. We're like, it just gets you really high. Like, great, pile it on there, probably riddled with pesticides, but once that communication got out there, people just literally, like, that light bulb went on. And it's crazy because we question what we put in our body, but let alone smoking. When you combust something and put it, straight into the bloodstream, we put no thought of it until that came out, where it's like, wait, what is actually in this stuff that I'm vaping, and I think that was a great point, because it really helped the consumer add that question. And like you said, it put the pressure on people that produce, like people that were doing it right. It was like, oh, we have our day now. Like, people care about what we care about slightly. And then the competitors that maybe didn't give a shit and only about the bottom line, it put some pressure on them to buckle up a little bit.
Yeah.
But we still got some ways to go in that regard. And like you said, the THC one is still something that has been very ineffective hitting the masses. People are definitely getting there, but in terms of mass, like consumer adoption of understanding that concept of THC chasing, we got a ways to go.
Oh yeah, ways to go. And also with the terpenes too, a lot of companies are still using botanical terpenes, terpenes from other plants, which is fine, but it's not going to do the same thing for you. It's merely really for flavor, probably at that point. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that goes too.
Yeah, and then that was the other thing, because I was curious too, on beyond just like VapeGate or whatever. Did you notice kind of the maturation of vape cartridges of the consumer going towards cannabis derived terps as we grew? Because obviously, when we first came out, when you think of, vaping outside of cannabis, most people that vape, it's all fruit flavors and all that stuff. Yeah. I think that's what people are kind of accustomed to. And then when you get to cannabis, I know that's why it's still popular. We still see like the cheap joints that are pineapple flavored or whatever. Like, they sell really well. I won't smoke them, but they sell really well. But do you feel like that kind of matured, where the consumer for vapes just kind of wanted, like, I want this to taste like weed and not fruit punch or whatever?
Unfortunately, I would say that we're actually looking at like two avenues of consumers. One where they're like, I don't really care, I prefer it to taste like bubblegum. And the other where it's like, no, I want it to taste like weed. I want it to feel like smoking flower. So I think those two markets are growing, and they're growing independently. So I don't think one will ever cancel out the other, unless regulations kick in where you can't use these other terpenes or flavoring agents. But until that happens, those two markets are growing in parallel, I would say. But we are, of course, on the side of only using the cannabis plant, because you said it, like, it goes straight into your bloodstream, and your lungs really aren't that good at filters. And so, to me, I'm always like, it should be 100% cannabis. Like, why? You're already inhaling something that's not air. Why introduce risk? And I still truly believe, and like when the vape crisis was happening, we were super vocal. We like interviewed on news channels and stuff, saying like, we still believe vaping is safer than smoking, but you need to be vaping the right stuff, and it needs to be 100% cannabis. It needs to be pesticide free. And unfortunately, companies are not necessarily, up until recently, they weren't incentivized or regulated around, being transparent about that, or testing for pesticides, for example. So we were like, consumers, you have to be the ones to take responsibility and like ask those questions and be buying the products that you can trust.
Absolutely. And that's the thing with pesticides that I don't think that another thing the general consumer doesn't understand is in the word concentrate. This is concentrated, highly concentrated of whatever the original material is. So even if the original material only has a little bit of pesticides in it, the concentrate is a much higher dose of that in a smaller batch. And that's why it's in the, whether you're vaping or dabbing, whatever, and you're in the concentrate forum, like that conversation is so much more powerful than the flower. I mean, it definitely reigns true, I think, across all the products used, but especially in that regard. And like you said, smoking, your lungs don't necessarily filter. When you eat something, your body has all these natural processes every step of the way to filter out stuff that your body doesn't need. Smoking, you don't. Your body's not meant to filter it the way it is other things.
Exactly. Yeah, you hit it right on the head.
Something interesting for you guys, like your concentrates that you put out, call them jam, correct?
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that of kind of giving it a creative name for that product SKU?
Well, first of all, the consistency is like jam, like spreading it on a piece of toast. But also, most concentrates are produced through hydrocarbon extraction, and so when you extract through CO2, you're actually extracting like a more like a broader chemical profile. And so not only is the taste going to be different, it's going to be more like the flower, but also the cannabinoid profile. And so it's a distinctly different product from most concentrates on the market. And so we wanted to make sure that the consistency and the category represented that, so that when people, because if you're um, buying a concentrate that's from like that's hash rosin or like live rosin, it's going to be super different from a CO2 extracted concentrate. So we had a lot of fun with naming it, but at the end of the day, it was like jam, like spreading it on toast, or spreading it on your pre-roll.
Mm, mm. I'm not a big dabber. That's my favorite way to consume concentrates is coating it on a blunt or something.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. And ours are so tasty. We have a blueberry that tastes like blueberries. And we also just came out with Island Boy, which is like so tropical and delicious. So I highly recommend that.
Okay, I'll have to check that out, man. And another thing I would ask on your product types is, you guys have done these collaboration, the artist series. I know that one of the big ones was my guy Perry Paints, aka Perry Porter out there. I love his artwork. Known him for maybe a decade at this point.
Wow,
but that was a great. Yeah. We met at a small show at like a community center in Federal Way in like 2011.
Wow. He is like one
that.
of the most talented people I've ever met.
Oh, he's stupid talented, and a great dude. He's been, since I've, again, the whole time I've known him, he's just always been good energy, great dude.
Yeah.
And a great, I've worked with him on the artist side, the music and the painting side, and he's a professional in both realms as well. But on these artist series, what was the, kind of the thesis into entering into that and the goal in collaborating with artists?
Well, so the product is called Volume, and
Right, volume,
it
yes.
kind of has a play on words, right? Like volume, like music, volume, like a series, And so the goal was really to highlight, to change the way people are purchasing cannabis, and to highlight how creative cannabis can inspire you. And so cannabis and art go really well together. That's why we host Heylo sessions, the music series. And Volume was really about art and community and the farmer, and telling the story about how this plant was grown and now we're extracting it and making it the best oil we can. And then we have an artist try the product, and then they're tasked with creating art that was inspired by the experience. And then that art becomes the packaging. So then the consumer looks at the packaging and says, wow, I feel that, I want to feel that. And that's why they buy the product, not because of the THC percentage, not because of the strain name or genetics, but because of that art. And so Perry was volume 3. We were completely sold out of that. And we're actually about to launch volume 4. It'll be on shelves the week of July 4th. And I guess that's next week, volume 4, so 4th of July. And so we will be announcing that later this week, the grower and the artist. But this artist does murals all over Seattle. So we're excited to really activate that community. But the inspiration behind it was to really challenge consumers to think of cannabis in a different way.
I love that. And it's just a great a great reason to do it, and connecting these different aspects of cannabis. Because at the end of the day, much like music, coming from a sense of creating music, as I always say, is like, as a musician, you're inspired by something else to create something that then you pass on to somebody else, that it gives them inspiration. It's like this chain of inspiration. And that's like, reminds me of you talking about that, reminds me a lot of just like how I view the process of like creating and putting it out.
Totally. Yeah. And music goes super well with cannabis. So we have Spotify playlists for every single strain so that you can like immerse yourself in the experience. So we love like that full immersive experience with cannabis and really incorporating many facets of your life into one experience.
Awesome. Oh, and earlier I said I had two questions and I forgot to ask the other one on the trends. So I'll backtrack a little bit on the trends. Are there any trends that you can think of in whether it's just recreational cannabis or specifically vapes that came and kind of went and had their little moment and fell off? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Man, I cannot think of any.
Maybe not. If they went away, then maybe that's
Yeah,
not.
it must have been just like a moment in time. I would say that one thing I'm continuing to see, but I kind of hope goes away, is this like blanket statement, like calm, party, those blanket statement categories that people are using to describe how cannabis can make you feel. And like, because most of the time it's not like what's the evidence to support that. Um, and so I think those are a lot of people try to execute on that and they haven't yet succeeded because oftentimes they don't deliver on the experience because it's too general. And that's just not the cannabis way. So it's so much more complex than that. So I would call out that one.
Okay. No, that's a good one because on one hand, it's like you meet the consumer somewhere where they understand. I get that and can respect it, but like me as a consumer, like I don't pay too much mind to like sativa or indica. Like you go into the store, like what are you looking for? This is this much THC. I'm like, don't bring up THC. You looking for a sativa or indica? I'm like, bro, I'm looking for specific strains.
Yeah.
I don't even want to hear those words out of your mouth. But I like I tend to like heavy indicas, but I don't drink coffee. I have a hard time going to sleep. I smoke weed throughout the day, and it's not like putting me. People are like, oh, this is gonna put you to sleep, and I'm like, that's what I'm gonna smoke in the morning. Like I'm fine with like. So I don't associate if I see something that says nighttime or whatever. I don't. Maybe if it's like a CBD with CBG, CBN or whatever, then I can connect with it. But when it comes to a flower, vape cartridge, or concentrate, I'm not necessarily looking for a mood. I just am looking for a strain. But I'm also not every consumer, so I'm not ignorant to understand that too. So
that's fair. Yeah, everybody is different, and that's the whole point. You got to figure yourself out, and cannabis really encourages us to do that. So I love it that way.
Absolutely. What do you got on next for the rest of 2022? I know you said this fourth edition of Volume comes out on July 4th, but you got anything else up the sleeve for the rest of the year?
Well, we'll actually be expanding to another state.
Okay.
So my family is in Ohio, and we'll be opening up out there hopefully later this year.
Awesome. That's big moves.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming. We've been working on it for a lot, like 4+ years. So excited to kind of actually make it happen. But the market needs it, let me tell you.
Because this is medical only out there right now, or do they have
medical only? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That'll be interesting, and you guys will fit right in there. Where do you kind of see the intersection of medical and recreational cannabis?
Well, I think it comes down to that wellness aspect and incorporate, understanding what you're looking for out of the experience. So I think medical can encompass so many different things, right? Like we're treating different things, whether it's an actual diagnosis or it's symptoms. So I would say that getting more out of life is about bringing your body into balance, and cannabis does that on a chemical level. And so I would say while we're in a recreational state here, we bridge both categories, and in Ohio we'll do the same, where we're trying to help people get more out of their life and bringing their life into balance.
I like that. That's a great answer. Awesome. Well, Lo, I really appreciate you joining us today on the RMR podcast, man. If people out there looking for more on Heylo, heylocannabis.com, at Heylo Cannabis on Instagram, anywhere else or anything else you want to plug real quick?
Spotify, Heylo Cannabis. Check us out. But Mitch, thank you so much. It's been really fun and to take a trip through, all that we've gone through this in the past few years. So thank you.
Awesome. No, appreciate you greatly. More growth. Excited to see this expansion to a new market. Excited to see what you got in store for this next volume. And yeah, man, just, more positive energy towards, people from the Washington, the Pacific Northwest. I know that's where we started. We got a good audience here, but we've obviously expanded quite a bit. But and Joey's even up and left us for California for the bright lights, but
Yeah.
I
A lot of
still
stuff going on down there, but don't forget about us, Seattle. Thank you so much, Mitch, and hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Awesome. Well, this is RMR Podcast episode 43 with Friesen of Heylo Cannabis.